Gabrielle, you're so courageous. I can never do what you did. That's the comment I often get when someone hears of my gender transition story. But I haven't always been courageous, especially when it came to getting honest with what my heart was saying about the essence of who I am as a person. I spent half of my life wrestling with culture's expectations regarding my gender. The fears in my head kept me stuck in a place that was not in integrity with my heart. Have you ever felt stuck? Ever felt your heart inviting you to consider a new vocational journey, but your head worried about finances? Ever felt stuck in a relationship? I invite you to be vulnerable with me today and raise your hand if you've ever wanted something but stalled on pursuing it. Look around. Feeling stuck is what many of us experience. You may even be feeling stalled right now because your heart is inviting you to consider something that might result in pushback from family or friends, or even your faith community. This is where I found myself 14 years ago when the man that I'd been living as stumbled across a website showing pictures that finally explained the internal gender dilemma that I had been struggling with for decades. This website showed pictures of transgender women. And when I saw those images, my heart immediately recognized, that's me. But then my head said, don't be ridiculous. You can never be that person. What is your church going to think? They're not going to let a trans woman continue serving as an elder and a Bible study leader. And think about your family. For heaven's sakes, your dad is a Pentecostal preacher. This will devastate your parents. And what about your wife and your kids? They didn't sign up for this. You could lose everyone in your life. Do you want to be alone for the rest of your life? And what about your career and your six-figure income? You could lose everything. So does any of this sound familiar? Well, despite my head's relentless attempts to convince me of these risks, my heart was quietly and persistently inviting me to consider a new path, a path of integrity and authenticity. Over the next 5 years, I mostly stayed stuck. But I did take one very small step in response to my heart's invitation. I continued my online research, and one day I Googled, thank God for the internet, dressing services, Atlanta. And to my amazement, a site popped up. Explore your feminine side. This was a local dressing service run by a woman named Ramona who actually made a living dressing biological males as women. I panicked. My online research had just gone from not too scary to absolutely terrifying. Now I had a choice to make. I could either take that next scary step and call Ramona, or I could stay stuck. Well, for the next couple of weeks, that's exactly what I did. I stayed stuck. But finally, I mustered the courage to call and make an appointment. Actually showing up for that appointment was my next scary step. In fact, as I was driving to her home that day, I was just a hot mess. But as soon as Ramona greeted me at the door and ushered me upstairs to her dressing salon, I thought I had died and gone to heaven. You see, her salon was rooms of dresses and shoes and wigs and jewelry and drawers of lingerie. And that's where we started. The first thing Ramona did was she held up a pair of padded panties, and said, Gabrielle, here's your butt. I said, my butt? I've got a butt. She says, girl, we're going to create this feminine silhouette on you. I said, give me that butt. Well, after she got me all padded and dressed, she sat me down in her salon chair and started applying the makeup and a wig, things that I had never done for myself before. Now, all this time she was doing my makeup and my hair, she was standing between me and the mirror, so I wasn't able to see the transformation that was taking place. When she was done, she looked at me and she says, Gabrielle, are you ready? With my heart beating wildly, I said, I think so. It was at that moment Ramona stepped away from the mirror, and there, for the very first time, I saw myself on the outside as the person I knew I was on the inside. I was 49 years old and meeting myself for the very first time. It was then I knew that is me. Well, as you can imagine, that was a very emotional experience for me. And I began to cry. And Ramona quickly caught me. She said, no, Gabrielle, girl 101. If you're crying before I put the makeup on you, not afterwards. I smile every time I see this photo that Ramona took of me that day, because it was the first time that I felt whole as a person. What I learned from this experience is that to get unstuck, we must acknowledge the fears in our head, but act on the truth of our hearts. Did you catch that? To get unstuck, we must acknowledge the fears in our head, but act on the truth of our hearts. The reality is, the fears are not going to go away. I just want to let you know that right now. They're here to serve a purpose. They're there to protect us, to make us feel comfortable. But at some point, we have to decide, are we going to live our lives comfortably? Or are we going to live our lives authentically? Well, after being suppressed for so many years, my heart's desire for authenticity was undeniable. Over the next several months, I had additional appointments with Ramona, and with each session, I felt more aligned with my feminine essence. That's why when she invited me to attend an international conference for trans people, I jumped at the chance. This conference was life-changing for me. It allowed me to see and meet hundreds of people who were just like me, finding my tribe, my community. It was empowering. But what was even more empowering was the opportunity that this conference gave me to live 5 full days in my true feminine essence. It was glorious. But as the final day of the conference drew near, my heart grew heavy with the thoughts of having to change back into my burdensome male persona. All the steps that I had taken in response to the truth of my heart allowed me to experience great joy, peace, and alignment. But my head was still full of fears, and I had no idea that I could live as the woman I knew I was. On the final day of the conference, I shared these fears with Ramona, and she told me that if I really wanted to explore this, then she would support me as I figured out what moving forward might look like. This was exactly the help I needed, because I feared coming out to my wife and kids until I actually knew that I could survive as a woman in our trans unwelcoming world, which brought me to the scariest step of my life. I called my wife and let her know that I would not be home for a while. I said I was okay, I just needed some time to find myself. By then, all of our kids were in college, so together we told them that I was out of town working, and I began to live my life as Gabrielle. That phone call was a terrifying step, which resulted in me learning yet another aspect of getting unstuck. And that is, we must take each scary step as it presents itself without necessarily knowing our exact destination. When I had that first appointment with Ramona, I had no idea that it would be so powerful that I would want to attend that 5-day conference. After attending that conference, I had no idea that it would compel me to make this heart-wrenching phone call to my wife. Each step had to be taken before the next could unfold. Over time, I realized that the process of getting unstuck is not about the destination. The process of getting unstuck is about the journey. And along our journeys, we all will experience various milestones. Meeting myself for the first time, that was a milestone. That heart-wrenching phone call was another milestone. And these milestones become the landmarks that we always remember, the things that we look back to in our lives when we need courage and think, well, if I made it to there, as scared as I was then I can keep moving forward. I can take my next step. And every step we take, no matter how small, we amplify our heart's soft, quiet whispers. And we help these whispers grow into a strong, confident voice. A voice that can stand up to the fears in our head and keep us moving forward courageously. After all, the root of the word courage is the word for heart. Did you know that? So courage comes from heart, and our heart is a muscle. So as we amplify our heart's voice, we actually build our courage muscles. That's right. With each scary step we take, we get a little stronger, a little more courageous, less stuck, more authentic. And here's the other thing I learned. We don't have to get unstuck just once in our lives. As we realize one aspect of our authenticity, our heart will call us yet to embrace yet another aspect of our truth. So where does that leave you today? To which additional aspect of authenticity is your heart calling you? As you answer that call, remember, all you have to do to get unstuck is take a step. Taking a step will reveal your next step and grow your courage muscles. Then you can take the next step and the next and the next. And there will always be a next step because our hearts are always calling us beyond authenticity. As with getting unstuck, authenticity is a journey, not a destination. Thank you.